please welcome the composer and lyricist of Americano, Carrie Rodriguez.
I didn't know I was a dreamer, although the sound of it rings true. I'm calling out to my Redeemer. Nothing is what I thought I knew. A family built on living lies. I was too blind to realize that I have always been a dreamer, without a land to call my own. A crooked line, a jagged border. One step inside and you are free. The other way is out of order. Now it's impossible to be a man who stands up for what's right, the brave Marine who joins the fight. But then I've always been a dreamer, without a land to call my own. But this is my hope, my heart, my soul. Who's to say this great country I vow to defend is no longer my own? And I'm not alone, my roots are sown. All I've ever known is I'm an American, this is my home. I can't believe they would deceive me. I trusted Mom with all my heart. Papa let me grow up believing that we belonged here from the start. How could they leave out this detail and make my life a living hell? I can't believe they would deceive me. Now I've no land to call my own. I've always known I was a fighter, and now they put me to the test. In my heart there is a fire to carry on despite the rest of those who say I cannot pass. You got no papers, got no chance. But then I've always been a fighter in a land that's not my own. But this is my home, my heart, my soul. Who's to say this great country I vow to defend is no longer my own? And I'm not alone, my roots are sown. Who's to say this great country I vow to defend is no longer my own? And I'm not alone, my roots are sown. All I've ever known is I'm an American, this is my home.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Carrie. And thank you to her husband, Luke, who's on the guitar. Thank you for being with us tonight, Luke.
You're
Appreciate it. It's also a pleasure for me to be the director of this world premiere musical Americano and the co-book writer, along with my dear friend Jonathan Rosenberg, who is watching here tonight from San Diego. And we're both thrilled to be a part of this project. The song that you just heard was called The Dreamer, and it takes place at the end of the first act. What we learn during the first act that leads us up to this song is that a young individual who was brought across the border at the age of 2 from Colima, Mexico, has been raised in the United States in Phoenix, Arizona, as if he was a citizen. He has worked construction with his family, his father and his brother. He has watched the Twin Towers fall at the age of 11 when he was in 6th grade. And at that time, he pledged to become a Marine. He wanted to be the first in line, the first on the line to protect this country. He never wanted to see fear enter his family or his friends' lives ever again. During the course of the first act, we learn about his family, the Hispanic culture, and the family organization around the Hispanic family living in the United States. We learn about his friends, his education, his growth, and his heroic efforts that he has done on an everyday basis. After all, we learn that he is actually related to a saint, and he is named after that saint, Antonio de la Mora. So all of these things lead up to the day that he, on his 18th birthday, goes to see a recruiter. And the recruiter, through the interview, begins to understand that Tony could not possibly be a citizen. With this knowledge, the recruiter says, you have to go home and face the truth. He does. He goes home and confronts his family, and he realizes that his entire life has just fallen apart in front of his eyes. So the first act concludes with the dreamer. Now, here's a interesting thing. This show started to be developed about 5 years ago. And about 3 years ago, we decided to go in a different direction than we had at the beginning. And we decided that we wanted to do a story about the dreamer. So Jonathan Rosenberg started researching to find a story about a dreamer. And indeed he did. And he found somebody right there in Phoenix, Arizona. So Jason Rose, who is the producer behind Americano, and the gentleman that brought this whole idea to the Phoenix Theater Company in the first place, and to myself, we called Tony out of the blue and started talking to him about doing a musical about his life. And could we interview him? Well, Tony had never even seen a musical, much less ever been asked if somebody would like to do a musical about his life. He came down, we met him, we spoke, he spoke to us for about 2.5 hours. He left, Jason and I looked at each other and said, here is our story. And along with that, we decided that this had to be an original, authentic sound. The music had to be inspiring, and definitely Latino-based. So we began to research again, and Jonathan, being our research guru, found Carrie Rodriguez in Austin, Texas, through the internet. We called her out of the blue. She'd only seen 1 or 2 musicals in her life, and she had never written for the musical theater stage. But once we had told her the story, she became entranced with it. And so thus began the beginnings of developing Americano, the musical, about 3 years ago, about this young man who has devoted his entire life to protecting and being a part of our country and wanting to give back. And the first act ends, as you've just seen, with the idea that he has just learned that he's not a citizen and he doesn't know what to do. So the second act completely unfolds and lets us know what has happened to this young man and what he has done to give back to this country in so many wonderful ways. So at this point, I would love to introduce to you the 2 individuals that I've been talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, please meet the man that inspired this story, and the story is based on his true life, Mr. Tony Valdovinos, and the composer and lyricist that we had such the privilege of meeting in Austin, Texas, about 3.5 years ago, Carrie Rodriguez. The Americano musical world premiere began January 31st at the Phoenix Theater Company of this year and ran through February 23rd. We closed extremely successfully, over 10 completely sold out shows, Most of the shows had sold between 99% and 100% throughout its entire run. It was extraordinary. And we have now been invited to New York to do a reading of the show for investor interest. We hope that we are able to do that in September. And that all depends, of course, on the virus that we are dealing with at this time. Tonight, you are going to hear some of the songs from this songbook that Carrie composed, and hear some insightful background into Tony's life that actually created and helped us develop the book and create the stories behind the music. So I also just want to mention that we are hoping that you will support the Phoenix Theater Company. Much of the proceeds tonight from your ticket sales will go to the Phoenix Theater Company. But if the feeling inside moves you, we would welcome you to go to www.phoenixtheater.com and make a donation towards this theater company that has had to shutter its doors for the first time in 100 years. I'm going to turn now to Tony, and I'm going to ask Tony, now the audience that is watching tonight knows a little bit about you and knew that you started in construction, were brought across the border at the age of 2, did not know that you were a citizen, and these kinds of things, and had done, ladies and gentlemen, some very heroic things in his early life along the way. But what we don't know, or what we didn't know, is what made you want to be a Marine? What was that calling that in 6th grade, when you watched those Twin Towers come down, what made you decide, I want to be a Marine?
You know, I think, Michael, appreciate the question. It's one of the things that has driven me for the most part of my adult and young adult life is the Marine Corps. And specifically, I wanted to join the Marine Corps because I had been a history student. I mean, I was a student of history, and I understood the actions of young Americans in World War II in the foundation of why the Marine Corps was created, and most importantly, the values that they lived by, which was honor, courage, and commitment. And those words to me echoed as a 6th grader. I was in 6th grade, and I had one morning awakened, and my mother was in a distressed state. We ran to her room. We thought something was going on with herself, but we saw it right there on the TV monitor. The towers were on fire, and it was a very confusing moment to see my mother react so heavily to something on TV. And I went to school with a very odd feeling. And very quickly, I recognized that it was a very serious situation. My teachers were not in the same, I would say, mode for the day. We all stood and pledged allegiance to the flag. And that day, it was very different. I knew something different was happening to us as a country. And I think growing up Latino, you have to be tough. You have to face fights. And I think to myself, you have 2 options in life: fight or flight. And I saw my mom be afraid. I saw my teachers be afraid. And I wanted to stand up for them. I wanted to protect my mother. And I think in that moment, in 6th grade, there was a lot of things I didn't understand, but it was truly at that moment where I wanted to dedicate the following years of my development to be ready to join the Marine Corps. I remember carrying 2 bags of 80-pound concrete with my dad because I wanted to be physically strong for boot camp. I understood that the Crucible was one of the most extraordinary physical feats that somebody can face, and I wanted to do it. I understood why Marine Corps boot camp was tough, and it's to make sure that your life is and the life of your men are in the best odds during operations. And I truly lived by it. I think that something very spiritual for me was important about joining the Marine Corps. I think it's something that my mother didn't understand. I think my father never had anything to tell me about it, but I think they didn't understand that I was very serious from a young age. And I think most importantly, as an adult, I learned that in that attack, one of my teachers who educated all four of my mother's boys lost his sister. So I think that that day, even if I wasn't as aware of what was truly happening, it affected me, it affected my parents, and I wanted to do my.
Thank you, Tony. Um, it's very insightful, and of course, this is a story that we have all heard, which has been driven into the script itself. There's an amazing song, my favorite song of the show, called "Join the Marines," that Carrie wrote early on, and it's a riveting song that once Tony realizes that he wants to join the Marines, this song is brought to fore on stage, and the construction workers turn into Marines. It's an extraordinary, large dance production that was choreographed by Sergio Mejia. The musical arrangements of the show were done by Sergio Mendoza and Marco Rossano. And it's just an exquisite experience to watch any and all of that. The other thing that comes out very realistically in the show is the relationship between the family, in particular his relationship with his father. His father sought and wanted only for Tony to be a part of the family, the personal family. Tony sought more. He wanted to be more. He wanted to do more. He wanted to give more, and he wanted his family to be more. So his father is in great conflict. And one night, when he's alone, he sings this next song that Carrie's going to do that expresses his philosophy and the philosophy that he would like to place onto his two sons. Carrie?
All right, so imagine me as Tony's father right now, if you can. So I'll be singing in his voice with mine. All right. Ser padre ain't easy, but tougher jobs I had known. And I've toiled in my lifetime, laid bricks and hauled stone, worked the fields from Colima down to Michoacan, and all I ever do ain't for me, it's for you. So be grateful, my son. Between the bricks and the bar, between the sheets and the it's an eye for an eye, 3 squares and a side. I don't care who you are, so stay close to your family, 'cause they're all that you have. Love the world like your mama, and work hard like your dad. I'm not much for talking. Some things are better left unsaid. I teach my sons by example, just like my father did. Work hard, keep your head down, not up in the clouds. Hector's doing just fine. He keeps right in line, but Tony leaves me with doubt. Between the bricks and the bars, between the sheets and the stars, it's an eye for an eye, 3 squares and a sigh. I don't care who you are, so stay close to familia, 'cause they're all that you have. Love the world like your mama, and work hard like your dad. Love the world like your mama, and work hard like your dad.
Thank you, Carrie. Tony, any thoughts about this relationship between you and your father, and what this song represents in this show to you?
Yeah, I think for any young man growing up, I think that especially in my culture with Latinos, my father was not a man of a lot of words. I think he was full of action. I always saw my dad make the impossible possible himself, whether it was lifting a beam that other men believed was just too heavy. My dad's attitude and his physical strength always prevailed. And so I think as a young boy, I saw my dad be extremely strong. And I think I always saw that, that was always something for me that I wanted to become. I wanted to be like him. I wanted to lift a cutting, skill saw with one arm. I always was fascinated with the way my dad's endurance was much higher than ours. Even if we were very young and in our prime, my dad was just so strong on the construction field. And I think that was his way of speaking to me. I think that he taught me how to lift. He taught me how to see a job as a mission. He taught me to complete things. And he never spoke to me. He never spoke to me about what it was to become an honorable person. He never spoke to me about how to live my life. I think my dad showed us that, there's the famous saying, as Cesar Chavez once said, "Si se puede." And my dad was always, "Si se puede." My dad showed us that. And I think that when I hear this song, I understand those moments and what those moments mean to me in my memory. When I face professional obstacles that I've never faced before, I always remember those days that my dad lifted that wall that we were trying to put up, and I just always remember those moments where my dad's safety was always put secondary so that we could finish the job, whether it was us drilling underneath concrete. It was those moments that taught me to work hard like my father. And it still prevails through me today. So that's what that song means to me. It's those moments where I physically watched him either I was 12 or 6 or 20, 24. I saw my dad always be the strongest one on the ground.
Well, and it's so interesting because through all the interviews with Tony, Tony always expressed that he was more brawn than brain, and he would he always wants to show how he can do things as opposed to tell you how he can do things, and obviously that comes directly from his father and his wish to be like his father, and his father as close, his father's sensibility of wanting to be family oriented first and only, where Tony saw his family being a much larger group of individuals, that his father learns to experience and to understand later in this musical. In the second act, this next song comes to us. Tony could not be a Marine. At the opening of the second act, he tries to join college. There's a big production number around that, but unfortunately, tuition for him, because of a ruling that came down, it did not make it affordable for him to be able to go to college anymore. He was left with not knowing what to do. And along came an opportunity to go to a rally about voter registration. And this, and he had to get permission from his Irish boss, who owned the construction company. And his Irish boss begins to understand and says, I understand why you would want to be a part of this and want to go out. And I'm so excited to see you do this because, you know, this was also about a dreamer. The rally was also about dreamers, and which were a very unique segment of immigrants into our country. And he said, well, he goes, you know, I came from a long line of immigrants as well as 98% of our population. And he says, so I completely understand why you want to embrace it, why you want to honor it, why you want to celebrate, and why you want to be a part of it. Well, this next song is called Next Generation. And it is about the fact that we're all immigrants of this country, or came from immigrants of this country in one way or another. And it's a big, rowdy, huge production number that explodes out of a rally about the dreamers. So Carrie, can you give us a little Next Generation?
Okay, I'll try to be as rowdy as possible without waking up the 4-year-old who's sleeping next door. Okay. I am you and you are me. We come from the same family. Oh yeah, that's right. You look at me in disbelief, but look back one more century. We both had the same plight. The parents of my parents, like your parents, they all fought the same fight. That's right. Sacrifice, leap of faith, leave all they knew behind. They had to strive to survive. So here we are as one. What's done is done. Gotta find a way to see things eye to eye. We're daughters and we're sons of those who fought and won to make a better life for the next generation. 1890 was the peak, more immigrants than ever braved the seas before. A rough and rocky history with its fair share of tragedy and more. Once they came ashore, injustice and inequity and struggling to make ends meet ain't for the weak of heart, but the endless possibility believe that we should all be free to have a brand new start. So here we are as one. What's done is done. Gotta find a way to see things eye to eye. We're daughters and we're sons of those who fought and won to make a better life for the next generation. We heard everyone's story. Those who came here before me paved the way, found a way to begin again. Colima to Kilkenny, Grandpa hadn't a penny to his name when he came so far from in the world. So many cultures converge to live together, work together for the same damn thing. A chance to dream, live in harmony, a new reality. I am you and you are me. We come from the same family. Oh yeah, that's right. You look at me in disbelief. We look back one more century. We both had the same place. So here we are as one. What's done is done. Gotta find a way to see things eye to eye. We're daughters and we're sons of those who fought and won to make a better life for the next generation.
Thank you, Carrie. That is such a fun number to watch on stage. I've got to give it up to our choreographer, Sergio Mejia, on this one. The musical arrangements were outstanding by Sergio Mendoza and Marco Rosado, and Carrie's music. But not only that, but the actors. And one of the actors in this particular number represented an individual that has inspired your life, Tony, in this, who really, really has mentored you along the way and has really helped you find a new path in life to give back to this country. Can you tell us a little bit about who has inspired you and why?
Absolutely. Around 10 years ago, I was not only not able to join the Marines after the Marine Corps discovered that I, in fact, did not have any sort of presence in the United States, and my parents told me after the recruiting station that I'd come home that I was, in fact, undocumented. And around 2 years after that, my mom really wanted me to be in school, and I didn't want to be in school. I knew that that's not what I had wanted for myself. I wanted to join the Marines, and I found myself in community college, and Arizona had passed a proposition called Proposition 300 to increase tuition for out-of-state students by over 600%. So I found myself out of the ability to afford college. I couldn't join, I couldn't educate myself, and I was invited to a political canvas, and there is where I met the greatest, one of the strongest mentors of my life, Corporal Ruben Gallego, now our Arizona U.S. Congressman for District 7, Congressman Gallego. I met him 10 years ago. I was attached to his team to knock on doors, and before he could tell me about himself, he was asking me questions about myself. It was the first time I had ever in my life spoke to an infantryman. I had met a lot of Marines that served in different MOSs, but I had never met an infantryman, and especially a 325 Lima Company infantryman, which have a very legendary presence in the Marine Corps. And I just think that it was one of those moments where later on in life, I truly believe that things are meant for us. Our paths don't always fortalece themselves in the way we want them to be, but in one way or the other, we do get with what we have to have. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to serve, and I found a different way to serve with a Marine. He showed me how to become an organizer, and we that same year elected the first Latino to serve at City Council in District 5. The second year after that, him and I worked together on a race to help elect another Marine to the state capitol in Legislative District 30. And in 2013, President Obama had implemented DACA, and I was able to get my first U.S. job working on a city council campaign that elected the first woman to be councilwoman from my home district, and now is our mayor. So Ruben Gallego mentored me for 10 years, and In 2014, I got the opportunity to be his field director. I had put together a field program with around 35 people that were involved in, we called them our squads, or from our entire platoon, and we helped elect the second youngest member to Congress in 2014. And it was one of the greatest achievements of my life. I had, at the time, got a job working at City Council as the community outreach director. I was the first streamer to work at City Council along with Ellie Perez, which was also a DACA recipient who worked at City Council and stayed at City Council. But for me, my heart was in the battle. It was in the field. And when Marine ran for Congress, nothing was more important for me than to be part of that. And I dedicated the 4 years of ground electoral experience that we had already had electing Latinos and a couple of women into elected office. And he became the second youngest member of Congress. And I remember going to his congressional inauguration, and I never would have thought that from digging ditches and removing hundreds of pounds and thousands of pounds of concrete that I would be in the halls of Congress. And I was able to touch President Kennedy's U.S. Senate desk, and I just thought that was one of the most phenomenal experiences that I had. And I think to myself, forever it held true. Marine is no better friend and no worse enemy, and I truly was able to embody that with the mentorship that Corporal Gallego was able to give to me for the last 10 years, and now he serves us proudly in Congress.
Thank you, Tom. That's a great backstory to this extraordinary character within the show, and the importance of that role in Tony's life as we tell this extraordinary human story. And I would like to underline and emphasize the fact that as we tell the story, it is truly a non-political story. One of the things that I thought was most exciting about the 4-week run is conservatives and liberals alike both came and said, I love this story. It's about a true, committed American to this country, and a person with no fear and great strength and perseverance. And God love him and God love us all. That's exactly what we need at this time. We are also dealing with extraordinary times, as Tony has been dealing with extraordinary times in his personal life. But we're all dealing with those times now. And it takes perseverance, strength, and the ability to say, nope, there's no fear. We will get through this. And that's what Tony shows us. This next song that you're about to hear takes place in the second act. He tries to make amends with his father after the end of the first act, when he realizes his father and mother have lied to him about his entire life. So his mother, desperate to try to bring the family back together, has him come over for dinner, in the hopes that his father, who's very stubborn, and Tony, who's very stubborn, will try to meet eye to eye. It doesn't go so well. And his father basically says, you will follow my rules or you will not be in this household anymore. And he says, fine, then I do not need to be here. I am not for just the family. I have a greater cause to accomplish. And that just ended their relationship at that point in the show. His mother begs him to stay because she wants him to know the story behind what brought them to the United States in the first place, the sacrifices that his father and she both made in order to provide a better life for Tony and his siblings. But this song is called We Could Go This Way, We Could Go That, and it is sung by the mother, his mother in the show, and it's backed up by a group of dreamers that are searching for the same things that that his parents were at the time. Carrie?
Little voices, little hands, difficult choices, but you got a plan. Provide for family ain't so easy when you're born right here instead of there. Little hardships, little lives, we all do what we must to survive. Grateful for what we've got, we know it's a lot more than most can hold. Truth be told, we could go this way, we could go that. Once we choose, there is no turning back. Gotta take our chances, gotta pick our sides, gotta keep on dancing, see what fate decides. Rio Grande to the Great Divide, Sonora and desert leaves no place to hide. Invisible lines we made, and now our children's fate hangs on what we choose. So much to lose for a feeling, for land, for a promise written in the sand. Decisions we have to make, hearts we have to break as we carry on, waiting for each dawn. We could go this way, we could go that. Once we choose, there is no turning back. Gotta take our chances, gotta pick our sides, gotta keep on dancing, see what fate decides. We could go this way, we could go that. Decisiones are all that we have. Gotta take our chances, gotta pick our sides, gotta keep on dancing, see what fate decides. Gotta keep on dancing, see what fate decides.
So, thank you, Carrie and Luke, again for this beautiful song. This is another extraordinary song that you will see, a production number that it develops as you actually witness the dramatization of them coming across the border from Colima, Mexico, into the United States for the first time, and following in suit with other dreamers at that time. Of course, at the time that they crossed the border was very porous at that time, and the United States was certainly seeking the need for labor, to which was offered to the Mexican labor that was coming across. Since 9/11, of course, those things have changed, and the situations are completely different than what they were. I will say I want to move on to the next thing, and that is, I wanted, Tony, if you could just take a moment to, once you learned the story of your parents' sacrifice in bringing you across the border at the time, how did you feel, and did that change anything in you as to the feeling that you were having about your parents having lied to you earlier on in life?
Yeah, I think this entire experience in itself, with my story being written, I think it took me a very long time, especially late in my 20s, to truly understand what my father and mother could have possibly been facing, and the nerve-wracking decisions that they had to make. My mother had given birth to me. Fro was 1 year old, and my father was college educated. My mother came from a family that produced agriculture, and there was no jobs, and um, there was a lack of food. And I think my mother recognized that we were in trouble, and she decided that she wanted to come back to the United States. And my mother had already worked in California. When she, in the 80s, my mother welded small computer chips. When computer chips started to really start being produced, my mother um, welded chips. My mother also was a seamstress. She would put together pillows and things of those nature. I always remember her working in some sort of factory. But my mother decided to come back. She knew that she wanted us to live in the United States. And I think that when I was in my late 20s, when I started my own business, and I started to just experience the turmoils of business and in life in general and growing up, I recognized, wow, I couldn't imagine what it was like for my father at the time to have two young boys, a wife, and a, a career that he had to start all over. My dad became from the cheapest tool belts you can find to the professional stuff. I saw my father go from, just like myself, from a rookie to a pro, and I was there in that journey with him. I remember the smell of drywall when I was 10. I remember the smell of wood. I loved the smell of lumber. To me, the smell of lumber always brought me the recognition and the memory of my father's strength. My father always looked like Rocky to me growing up. He was always huge. His shoulders were huge. He could pick up 2x6s with an arm. And I always looked up to that. I always saw my dad be very strong. And I think in the decisions that my mother and father made to leave their hometown where they had everything, family, resources, everything, and they crammed into an apartment complex with my aunt, and two families lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. And I remember those journeys. I remember the frustration in my father, and the fear in my mother. But I also, most importantly, remember the courage. I remember my mother taking up a third job. I remember my father waking us up at 5 a.m. to load tools, and then we would get ready to go to school. And it always, for me, I always realized that as I was in school, my father was alone, and there was a lot to do. There was a lot of heavy equipment to move, and I always had an eagerness to do my time with him. And if he called to pick me up after school, I was going to show up, and I was going to go work. It was not time to see friends, and Saturdays were the same thing. Most kids woke up in grade school to see Cartoon Network. I woke up with Fro at 5 a.m. to load hoses, hammers, tool belts, equipment amongst equipment. And I always saw my dad's leadership, but I think now in my own life, as a CEO of my own firm, employing dozens of people, it's hard. You see money be spent, you see things go wrong, you see things go right. And I remember when things went right on the construction field for my father, and I remember when things went wrong on the construction field with my father. Like, he never ever did not ever complete something to his best of his ability. So I think that really carried on to me once I got involved and I met Gallego. I put my 100%, my family's name behind everything we were doing, and I always took it like my dad. My dad always went the extra 4 miles. People always make that reference, like, go the extra mile, but I remember we went the extra 4 miles because I remember the extra time. When we were finished, we did not leave that job site until it was completely broomed. And I learned discipline through that. I learned to always leave things pristine. Even if you don't have to, you should, because it's your work. And I thought that, I saw that in the Marine Corps. I saw that in Ruben. I saw that in discipline in campaigns. And I decided to try and pursue that, which was trying to persevere in any obstacle and during work
again, an extraordinary, insightful individual that we have gleaned so much from in order to tell this story. The second act unfolds from its beginning when he learns that he cannot attend college. He goes to this rally. He is embraced by this individual that gives him a new perspective on life, and he goes out to help not only his people, but Marines, voters, period. It doesn't matter who they were. It is just the fact that exercise your right to vote, be a part of the American way. The story also has a very, very much of a love story attached to it. That dates back all the way to his childhood with this young woman named Ceci. She ultimately joins the Marines, and the music that they sing together will have to be in volume 2 of Americano Concert Live, because we chose to not be able to sing everything tonight. And so the romantic songs and the relationship songs will be a part of our second volume. But they're extraordinary, from very passionate, poignant ballad to a very ferocious and very biting song when they're at odds with each other. The second act continues with a great deal of ups and downs for Tony, and the danger of what might happen to the undocumented during the formidable years of his life. The show ends on a note that if you have not seen the show, I'm actually not going to spoil it for you, but it is a huge turning point for Tony, and he has to decide within himself whether or not he has the ability to get up and continue forward. Ceci, the love in his life, comes to him and tells him, yes, that's what you have to do. The final song of the show is called the El Americano Dream, and it is a song about hope. It is a song about the future. It is a song about desperately wanting to be accepted for who I am, for who you are, and to be able to be a part of giving back to this country, because that's all Tony, and that's all the Dreamers ever wanted to do, was to give back to this country. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you've heard Tony speak, and you've heard Carrie's music, she took what he had to say, she took what we were doing with the writing, and she created this song of hope that is sung by all 23 members of the cast under the musical direction of Jivey, Jonathan Ivey. We affectionately call him Jivey, and he did an extraordinary job, so I needed to point him out as well. But Carrie and Luke, would you give us a little bit of a Americano Dream?
Yes. Okay. Yes, I have always been a dreamer. Not just for me, I dream for you. I'm calling out to my Redeemer. Please give me strength to help me through one more devastating fail, another obstacle to scale, and I'll remain a great believer in el Americano dream. El Americano dream. I think we all know what that means. It doesn't matter if you're brown or white, a country built by immigrants, one that embraces difference. At least that's what it is supposed to be. El Americano dream. This is my home, my heart, my soul. Since I was 2 years old, it's all I've ever known. I grew up just like you, pledged allegiance to the red, white, and blue. And I'll defend through and through what I know to be true. El Americano dream. I think we all know what that means. Work hard and serve your country faithfully. Become anything that you want to be. Like generations who all came before. Saw Ellis Island and beyond the shore. A promise of an opportunity. God bless the land of liberty. This is my home, my heart, my soul. Since I was 2 years old, it's all I've ever known. I grew up just like you, pledged allegiance to the red, white, and blue. And I'll defend through and through what I know to be true. My roots have been sung, and I am not alone. We are your sons and your daughters, your mothers and fathers, students and teachers, your doctors and preachers, builders and planners, your artists and dancers, doctors and lawyers, tax-paying supporters, American denizens. We are your citizens, and this is our home.
Amazing, amazing. Oh gosh.
Whew, okay.
Thank you, Carrie and Luke, both of you. Carrie, thank you for your incredible music and your extraordinary stylings. I'm going to leave with one question for both of you. Since you are both kind of brand new to the world of musical theater, what has been this experience like for you? What has this experience been like for you? What has it brought out in you as we all go, forward in life?
Oh,
Tony, what has this experience been for you?
I mean, it's been really inspiring hearing Tony talk about perseverance and getting through and completing a project. I think I had to definitely dig deep at certain moments in this process. I mean, I knew, signing on to this, that it would be a challenge because I've never written for musical theater before. I've never written for so many different voices, so many different points of view. Some songs have 4 different people with differing opinions singing verses.
Yeah.
So yes, there were very trying moments, but then to get through them and come out on the other side and feel like I found a song that is resonating with people, it just brings me so much joy. And, also it's just, I feel like it's kind of one of the great honors of my life, getting to tell this story. It's such an opportunity to share Tony's story with the world and help people connect with Tony who didn't know how much they had in common with him, and relate to Tony and empathize, and then hopefully want to do things that are going to better our country because of it. So I just feel like this was the greatest gift, also the hardest gift. But and we're still not on the other side. We're still working hard. I know we're still going to be making changes, writing a new song or two. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's been so good for my songwriting, and then when it's time to sit down and write a little old folk song for me, that sure feels good and easy. So yeah, I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to tell your story, Tony. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Carrie.
And Tony, what's been your experience?
You know what? I'll be very authentic with everybody. This has been an uphill fight from the beginning, and it still is. We just are in the middle of still waiting to hear from the Supreme Court to see what the fate of over 300,000 DACA recipients here in Arizona are going to be when we are in this crisis moment, and a lot of people are in bad shape. So I think that this is this entire experience has re-hardened the reasons why, when it comes to electing the right leaders, we have to fight fiercely, because we need representation to making sure that our communities are represented correctly. This experience through Americano has allowed me to bridge my faith back with God through so many turmoils with the family, through school not being able to join, and so many of the struggles of being surrounded by so many warriors like Viridiana Hernandez, executive director of Poder in Action, which is a local group here in Arizona that has fought fiercely for immigrants and immigrant rights. I think this country is strong, and we all believe in the country. I pledge allegiance to the flag ever since I was in Head Start. I remember being in Head Start and pledging allegiance to the flag. And I think that every day as Americans in spirit, we wake up to contribute to our neighbors, to contribute to our families, and to contribute to society. And we've seen that recently with so many people deciding to hunker down and protect each other in these times that are confusing. But this entire experience has been incredible to me, Michael, and to realize that art is healing. In this entire process, I've had to truly face myself in a lot of deep hidden thoughts in my relationship with my father and growing up in the circumstances that we did. But I think that it all connected back to having courage in the first place to protect the family, to fight for the country, to protect the country and fight for the family. I think that everything that we share in why this country is one of the most powerful and strongest, and is a beacon of hope. And to this day, I feel very responsible to the Marines. I take up any chance I possibly can. I have a lot of relationship with Marines. Some of my friends in high school became Marines. And I always deeply acknowledge that there is people in life that are willing to do the extraordinary to protect our way of life. To me, I think it's been a daily duty to remember the name of Medal of Honor recipients and Americans that didn't come home, which is the reason why we're protected and get to live in the strongest economy and build our futures. And so I think I have a debt to this country that every day I wake up proudly to pay. And I'm excited for the future. I'm very grateful towards Carrie and the incredible art. I mean, imagine having dinner with one of NPR's best, new music talents, and next thing the songs that Carrie produced were impossible. I couldn't believe that truly what it felt like was authentically written in a song. And I think that is what really allowed me to dig deeper into my faith and truly understand that so many of the people that propelled me and I was able to propel myself to serve others and to give our best to our families. My younger brother, who just turned 23 last night, is the first college graduate of my family with an electrical engineering degree.
Wow.
I think that that's what the American dream really is to see your sons and daughters become happy and become, they believe in themselves. And I think that is something that I believe in this story, and I hope that I can help any other dreamer that did lose hope. I lost hope many times, but I think it was courage and people in my life that allowed me to continue fighting. And we're not out of the woods yet. We are not in the, we share a lot of different fights with people who are not immigrants. And I think that here in the United States, we're progressing towards our human value. Sometimes are hard to understand with our human values. So I think that that's the idea of civic engagement, and that's what I love doing every single day is teaching young students how to civically get elected in their own precincts, how to help a city council member get elected, how to have a open relationship with your mayor, to making sure that your neighborhood has its fair share of resources. So I love doing what I do, and I very much am grateful to Michael and Carrie and every person that made this happen. And I'm looking forward to part 2 for sure, Michael.
Thank you. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Carrie. I want to leave everybody with the idea that there's nothing like live theater. There's nothing like the ability for that live performer to be able to experience what you're feeling, and for us to be able to tell a story with music, with dance, with acting, with sets, costumes, and bringing the joy of any and all stories to life. So we look so forward to having you come back to our home at the Phoenix Theater Company. Thank you for Tony for allowing us to tell your story. Thank you, Carrie, for composing the music. Thank you to Jonathan Rosenberg and to myself for writing the book and directing the show. And obviously, a great, huge thank you to Jonathan Ivey, musical director, Sergio Mendoza and Marco Rosano for musical arrangements, Sergio Mejia for choreographer, Jason Rose for creating the inception for the show and producing this show with the Phoenix Theater Company, and to the brilliant cast that we had, the absolutely brilliant cast that we had during the world premiere. Such extraordinarily amazing talent that brought life to the stage. I applaud and love you all. If you have an opportunity to think about doing a donation to the Phoenix Theater Company, we would welcome that during these times when we are shut. And from our home to your home, we wish you nothing but great health and safety. Good night.
Bye, y'all.